When your job is short-staffed but you still have to complete the work like everybody's there, sometimes you need to use some malicious compliance. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, you sure you want your money? Fine, you're gonna get every penny. This isn't my story, it was a close friend of a then close friend. I'm not sure how I never thought about sharing it, as it is one of the best malicious compliance stories I've ever heard. There's also quite a bit of background here, mostly to explain old tech. This guy, we'll call him G, was pretty wealthy. Dude had a nepo job where he worked in a factory fixing the machinery, which almost literally never broke. Someone always had to be on duty to be ready for repairs, so he got all kinds of overtime and was being paid almost $75 an hour in the early 2000s. To give you an idea of the kind of money he was making and how he didn't care, he spent most of the whole day sitting around watching movies on a personal laptop that he had spent over $2,000 on and just left it at his desk. If he had a call to the floor, it would take him no more than an hour, and that would happen maybe 3 times a week. Holidays were 2.5 times pay, and he worked every one of them. This guy was a bit of a tech nerd, and he got an ISDN account as soon as it came out. For you youngins or folks who weren't savvy at the time, ISDN was basically two 56.6 kilobit per second modems smushed together. This was back when 56.6K was as good as it got for residential, and you could still pay for slower. So fast as freak for its day. Back in the days of dial-up, the dark ages, some services would be paid by the minute of usage, in addition to your monthly bill, and that's how this worked. Also, because dial-up was literal and used existing infrastructure, you could take your modem with you and use it somewhere else by logging into your account from a new location and dialing the closest number to you. This was also back in the day of long-distance charges. Now for the actual story. G just got his ISDN modem, and after a day or so took it to his brother's house one town over to show him how fast it was. And after they played around on the internet for a bit, G had to go to work and he would be doing some long shifts for the next couple of days. So his brother asked to borrow his modem, which G said was fine. I don't understand exactly how it happened, but his brother had signed into a long distance number and then forgot to shut the connection down. And then G got his first month's bill. It was over $14,000. He immediately called the service provider and explained the situation, and they basically told him, "You signed a contract, sucks to suck, we want our money." He relented and set up a payment plan. He would also be required to keep the contract going until the bill was fully paid. Now, if you've never even heard of ISDN, even if you're 30 plus years old, I don't blame you. This was a very short-lived technology and was replaced by DSL just a couple of years later. But unlike ISDN, DSL required new infrastructure. And for some reason I don't fully understand, but I've guessed is probably the way some important switch on the service provider's network was set up, the two services could not coexist in the same small region. Regions the size of, like, a neighborhood. And G lived in a pretty nice neighborhood. Not mansions, but upper middle class. The best neighborhood our small town had to offer, in fact, and people just wanted DSL. It was the first time the internet was getting close to recognizable as it is today, because it was so much faster than what was previously available. The folks in this neighborhood wanted those speeds and did not like being told that they couldn't have it. So, service provider calls up G and explained the situation and offered to waive the remaining amount of the bill. G told them the whole bill was bullcrap and asked if they would refund what he had already paid, but they just told him to go freak himself. Cue malicious compliance. G tells them he has a contract and points out that they are obligated to fulfill their end of the contract, and he will be paying his bill in full, and hung up. He keeps paying. Service provider keeps getting calls from more customers wanting DSL, and folks who had previously called, calling back more and more irate. G gets another call, then another, until service provider decides to just tell people exactly who is responsible for their neighborhood's lack of DSL service. His neighbors let loose on him. But does G care? Not at all, just keeps paying his bill. This went on for more than a year. Eventually, service provider just decided to get rid of ISDN completely, as it was a legitimately outdated technology, and did forgive the remainder of G's bill since they weren't fulfilling their end of their contract, but the whole thing was just wonderful. Edit, some people have pointed out technical issues with the story, and someone said that I'm repeating a tall tale from someone else, and that'll be true. This is the story as it was told to me. I suppose the main takeaway here is if you have a service that can cause that kind of wallet damage if you're not careful, it should probably incentivize you to be extremely careful. I've never heard of ISDN. That said, I am old enough to have used dial-up back when I was pretty little. I was in a situation that even from a pretty young age, I've always had some kind of exposure to computers. The worst part was playing any kind of online game, and then a phone call comes in and somebody picks up. You're using dial-up and that happens? Bye-bye internet. Fruit Dispenser commented, "If I leave the water faucet on and go on vacation and the water bill is super expensive, it's my fault. Why would it be different for ISDN?" Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy awesome stories of malicious compliance, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? That said, our next story is, I thought I mastered malicious compliance, then my wife showed me how it's really done. For this story, you need to know that I'm the kind of person who will go a great distance for a good laugh, as you'll see below. I love this story, and we tell it every once in a while, even though it's been more than 20 years. I live in the US and I own an IT support company. Many years ago, I used a cell phone company named Nextel. They had a great push-to-talk feature that turned your phone into a walkie-talkie, which was perfect for communicating with coworkers in my IT work. However, their customer service was a nightmare. Anytime I needed to contact them, it would take at least 30 to 40 minutes on hold. Eventually, I had to switch to a cheaper service, which meant getting a new number. Now, you can port your number to a new carrier, but back then, you had to change numbers if you switched carriers. I canceled all the phones on our plan except for mine, which I downgraded to an emergency plan, costing about $10 a month. I left the old phone plugged in at my office and set my voicemail message to instruct callers of my new number. The phone just sat next to my desk on a shelf, plugged into a charger so that I could see if anyone called. I could also hear the phone make a sound when it disconnected from the cellular network and then a different sound when it connected to the cellular network. It connected and disconnected constantly there in my office. I would estimate that it only stayed connected to the network about 50% of the time. After 6 months, I decided to cancel it. I had to wait on hold for the customary 30 to 40 minutes just to cancel my service. After telling the service rep that I was always dropping off the network and that I'd already switched services, they verified the service problems on my account and canceled my entire plan. I wasn't under any contract at the time, so there was no problem canceling my service with Nextel. As expected, I got my final bill. It was somewhere around $10 since that was my monthly plan, just the emergency plan, and I didn't make any phone calls. I paid the bill and was happy to be done with that carrier. Then, the next month, I got a bill for 4 cents. Yes, just 4 cents. I figured it was a clerical error and ignored it, expecting them to write it off, but no. Each month, another bill for 4 cents arrived. I was incredulous. I checked the postmark and saw that the postage to send me the bill was costing them 10 times more than the bill itself, and they kept sending the bill every month. I could have paid the bill, but it seemed ridiculous to write a check for 4 cents and spend more on a stamp. After 6 months, I finally had enough and decided on some very petty, malicious compliance. I decided to invest the 40 minutes on hold to call Nextel to work this out. By golly, if they wanted my 4 cents, I would give them my 4 cents. I planned to wait on hold for 40 minutes and pay the 4 cents with a credit card, knowing it would cost them more in fees. I told my wife about my plan, thinking it was the perfect malicious compliance story, but my wife, the true master of malicious compliance, suggested an even better idea. Call and ask if I could make payments on the 4 cents, splitting it into 2 payments on my credit card. Oh my god, I was in the presence of malicious royalty. I called, waited on hold for 40 to 45 minutes, and finally got through to a representative. The representative sounded like one of those airport terminal attendants who act like they're checking your reservations, but instead they're writing a Stephen King-length novel. I could hear the clickety-clackety sound of the keyboard. The female representative was constantly typing as I explained that I'd canceled my service, but kept getting the final bill and proposed making payments. The representative, typing away, said she would look up my account. As she typed away at her keyboard, I explained that I'd gotten the final bill and that I would like to set up a payment plan to take care of the outstanding balance. I told her that I would like to pay half on my credit card today and pay the remaining half the following month. She was agreeing with me and typing away when suddenly she stopped typing and went quiet. "Sir," she said. "Yes," I replied. "Are you aware of the balance amount?" "Yes," I said. "4 cents?" she said. "Yes," I said. "I figured that you really wanted that 4 cents because you kept spending all of this postage to send me bills each month, so I'm just calling you to take care of it." After a brief silence, I heard the clickety-clack of the keyboard again, and she said that I would not have to worry about the balance because she was writing it off. I insisted on giving my credit card for the first half of the payment, but she firmly dismissed it and assured me I wouldn't get any more bills. My wife's suggestion turned a simple prank into a masterpiece of malicious compliance. I may be good at it, but my wife is on another level, and you really have to want to do malicious compliance to wait on hold for 40 minutes. Edit 1. Thank you to all of you kindred spirits of malicious compliance. I wanted to post an edit to show what I've learned from this great community. Although I have fond memories of this story, my wife and I both laugh at the other, possibly better options of dealing with this situation. First, a couple of commenters stated that I was stupid for waiting on the phone for 40 minutes to do this. Yes, no argument there, but my first line above states that I'll go a great distance for a laugh. However, no customer service reps were injured in this exercise. The conversation only took a couple of minutes. I saved the company money because they fixed their stupid error. They stopped spending more on postage than the actual bill, and I was working in my office while I was on hold, so a little time traded for a funny story. Second, some people had great ideas for other possibilities. Most suggested paying slightly more than the 5 cents so that Nextel would have to deal with the refund. Then Nextel would constantly have to send me statements in the mail. I like this, and if Nextel ever sent a refund check, I wouldn't cash it. I know in my own business that when a customer writes a check for a penny off, it causes me at least 5 minutes to fix. Sometimes even takes a little longer, so this option appeals to me. Peacemaker45 suggested paying it with British pound to make them deal with conversion and a refund. I love this. Do you know how much that would cost me? I would definitely do this next time. Squibbit314 suggested taping 4 pennies to the bill and mailing it in. I wondered if taping 5 pennies would generate more issues for Nextel and give me a 1 cent credit? So as ridiculous as it sounds, if I were in OP's position, I would want to do a lot of the stuff that OP described, but I would almost be worried that for whatever reason somehow, they would manage to send that 4-cent bill to collections. Could you imagine getting a ding on your credit because you didn't pay somebody an outstanding 4-cent bill? R. Crossler commented, "These companies need to have an auto filter that just writes off balances less than the cost of sending statements. They would save a bunch of money and would be able to deduct that as a business loss." OP responded saying, "I had a friend who used to work in the oil fields. He would work something like a week on and then a week off. He once had his gas shut off because of a 10-cent gas bill that he just thought he would pay on the next month's bill." Additional edit, when he got back to his house after being in the oil field and found the gas off, he called in. The rep was nasty to him and blamed him for not paying the bill and told him that he was in arrears and that he deserved to have his gas shut off, until she saw the amount was only 10 cents, and then started apologizing profusely and scheduled a work order for someone to reconnect it the next morning. Kudos, Bruce. One Pumpkin 1590 commented, "I had a credit card I canceled in the 90s because I was overcharged and they would not refund me the difference. It was a small amount, about $4, but they demanded I pay a final amount, and it turned out to be about 80 cents more than what I actually owed. So I kept on getting a bill each month that said I had an 80 cent or so credit. I was enjoying that they were sending postage letting me know, mostly because they told me what to pay. After 11 months or so, I got a bill that said the balance was zero. I called them up and wanted to know where my money went. They claimed at first that there was no credit, then found it and added it back to my account. This time they sent a check. I never cashed it though. They didn't send anything out after that." Our next story is, want me to keep talking even if nobody's listening? Alright. This happened when I was around 14 to 15. I was telling a story to my dad, and at one point he interrupted me, told me, "Keep talking, I'm listening very carefully," then left and closed the door. I didn't know it at the time, but he was very proud of this joke. He made it to my mom a couple of times. She never liked it. Anyway, I thought it was somewhat funny but also pretty rude. Never mind. I knew an opportunity to teach my dad a lesson would come sooner than later, so I waited. And a couple of hours later, he would come and ask me to do the dishes. I said, "You know I can't." He said, "What do you mean you can't? Why can't you do the dishes?" I tell him, "I told you earlier." He replies, "No, you didn't." I tell him, "Yes, I did. You know this. You told me you were listening very carefully." Him, realizing what I was doing, said, "Oh, right. Well, could you remind me? I forgot." I said, "No way. I'm not repeating myself. I already gave you a very simple and rational explanation." My dad was strict, but he knew when he was beaten at his own game. He did the dishes that day, and he never made the joke again. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised the kind of person that would make that joke, keep talking, I'm listening very carefully, and then just walk away, would also be the same kind of person that would actually honor this kind of call out on their joke. Especially when OP says their dad was strict. For them to go, "You know what, you beat me at my own game, kid," and do the dishes? It's like getting free ice cream. Dragonchild commented, "My kid once told me, 'You made me, now you have to live with the consequences.' She was right. Love her to death." Smortank commented, "Back in high school, I would watch TV a lot in the basement. I got all my chores and homework done and was making A's. Just was a social outcast. One day, my dad came downstairs to grab a bottle of wine, freaking cold down there. He looks at me on the couch and shakes his head with a slight grin, a tell he had when about to joke or prank. He says, 'You're so worthless, when are you gonna do something useful?' Trying to hide his grin. I replied, 'Yeah, well, that's why you put me down as a dependent on your taxes.' I continue to watch SpongeBob. My dad blinks a few times and then bursts out laughing. He continued to laugh after getting the wine. On his way back up the stairs, he praises me for the quick wit. Love my dad. That was one of his favorite stories to tell of me. Miss that man." Our next story is, "Want me to come see you even though I'm sick and trying to go to the bathroom?" Okay. Currently on the mend from COVID, and being sick reminded me, 27-year-old male, of something I did when I was younger, and I thought some people here would enjoy it. During Christmas break during my first or second year in college, around 19-year-old male, my siblings and I were in charge of cleaning up the house before we had guests over for Christmas Eve dinner. I was feeling off that day and kept running to the bathroom to relieve myself. I had the runs. Really, not trying to be punny. My bedroom was in the basement, but I had to come upstairs to use the bathroom anytime I needed to go. So, next time I had to go, I felt like I was going to throw up. I flew up the stairs and tried to run to the bathroom, but my older sister, 22-ish, called for me from the kitchen. It went something like this. Sister said, "OP, come here." I replied, "Okay, but can I go to the bathroom first?" She jumps in, "No, I need you to come here now." I said, "But sis, I think I'm gonna be..." She chimes in again, "OP, come here now." Understanding that I would be yelled at regardless of what choice I did, I begrudgingly went to the kitchen. My sister barely opened her mouth before I ran over to the sink and hurled into it. I don't think I ever threw up so much before in my life. My sister was ticked and sent me to my room, where I ended up spending the rest of the day in confinement. Turns out I had a pretty bad stomach bug and my sister had to clean up the sink I threw up in. I ended up missing out on the nice barbecue dinner my family had that night. No, it was not Christmas Eve that day. My siblings and I were just getting the deep cleaning done that day. But come Christmas morning, my sister couldn't join the rest of us for the gift opening cause she was sick then. To this day, she gets mad whenever the story gets brought up and tells me I should have just gone to the bathroom. Now, to be fair, I actually fully agree with the sister here. Even if you have somebody absolutely yelling and ripping you apart and saying, "No, you need to come here right now." Like, let's say even if it's in like a school scenario and you have one of those awful evil teachers who believes that you're all going to the bathroom to fool around or vape all day or something. If you gotta go for whatever reason, you just go and you deal with the consequences later. It might be temporarily fun to think about them having to deal with the fallout of you vomiting in their classroom, but let's be real, do you want that visual actually tied to yourself for all of your classmates? The Sanch1128 commented, "When you know the other person is going to be mad at you no matter what, go for the option that causes that person the most distress." Well played. Our next story is, "Attendance isn't mandatory?" Okay. Background: I went to university in Germany. A part of my curriculum were courses in sociology and philosophy. A lot of those were marked down as successfully attended without getting graded. Usually you proved attendance with a list you signed every time. The characters, Ticked and Angry, the two professors' assistants who were probably forced to teach the course, me, and the roughly 100 other students. The situation: Ticked and Angry had to teach a course about important figures in sociology. It was already a dry topic, but the real issue was their behavior. When Ticked talked, you could hear the hate drip from her every word. When Angry talked, it felt like getting yelled at. We hated just being there, but we needed to complete the course. The first 2 times, like usual, the list would go around and we wrote down our names, student ID, and email. The third time, however, the lecture was almost over and the list hadn't gotten to me yet. So I raised my hand and asked about it. I said, "Excuse me, the list didn't get around to us yet." Angry, very annoyed at the interruption, replied, "What list?" I said, "The one for attendance?" Angry replied, "That wasn't an attendance list. We needed your names and email to send out the assignment to complete the course." The assignment was just a 3-page essay about a randomly selected sociologist. Nothing you couldn't do with just Google. I replied, "So there isn't a mandatory attendance?" Angry replied, "No. I think you can see where this is all going." Malicious compliance. I looked at my buddies, they shrugged, and we just up and left. What I didn't see coming was how almost everyone else saw this as their cue to leave as well. I will never forget the dumbfounded faces of Ticked and Angry. Aftermath. A while later, we got our assignments, finished them, and sent them in, thus successfully completing the course. For the rest of the semester, only 3 to 5 students still showed up, so Ticked and Angry had to teach a practically empty classroom that could fit around 200 people. If you're angry and ticked and you're now in this classroom with just a handful of people, honestly, I feel like at that point you would ask the people who did attend, "Do you guys really want the teaching course, or you want to just kind of hang out for the hour and get the assignment or do some work or something?" At that point, it's like, let's just work together to make this as nice as possible. The username is Beer commented, "Had a similar experience at university but with economics. But due to the fact that the teacher was boring and seemed to not wanting to be there, from 100+ students, I think at the end of the semester, less than 10 were still in attendance." Our next story is, you need to get your priorities straight now. I'm sending a special shout out to all teachers who are starting the new school year. I was at a training yesterday morning. 24 hours prior, my wife broke her ankle pretty badly. It had to be reset. I was with her all that day, and yesterday during the training, she was recovering from her surgery while I learned how to use IXL, a math program that's pretty easy to figure out for the most part. That night before the training, my wife and I discussed the financial aspect of missing days. And though I took the day off when she broke her ankle, obviously, we both decided I would go to the aforementioned/yesterday's IXL training. I got there a minute early, or 14 minutes late according to the USAF, and situate myself. I open up all the websites they say to, do the Padlet AI welcome page drawing they request of me, and get ahead of the program. The rest of the room is jibber-jabbing as the presenter and the other district personnel meander around the room. I see a text from my mother-in-law, and as she's at the hospital with my wife, I decide to look at it. Gina, my wife, is asking about my pay. Her phone got an alert about a payment. My Rapid card has an alert that goes to her phone, but her phone died before she could see how much. I decide to log into my Access page to see how much and tell her whether we're covered for the deductible that they haven't collected yet. It literally took 20 seconds to do this. And of course, this is when Miss Low Glasses decides to pretend she's my teacher. She pokes me on the shoulder repeatedly. I'm pretty sure she thinks she's tapping me, but it's uber aggressive and says, "You need to look at the screen she's showing you." I start to comment back by saying, "Sorry, I was just..." When she interrupted me abruptly, shouting enough for God and Satan to hear, "You need to get your priorities straight." Enter Malicious Compliance. I was so embarrassed and ticked at the same time. Ticked? It was totally uncalled for. It was when everyone was jibber-jabbing, and it was to check on an important time-sensitive thing. It made me realize that yes, I do need to get my priorities straight. I replied just as loudly as I had everyone's ear now, "You know what? I do need to get my priorities straight. My wife's in the hospital." "I'll be leaving now," and I walked out. The lady looking at me through her lowered glasses scoffed, and the other district personnel pulled her aside and chided her as I walked out. One of my homies yelled out, "Love you, OP, it's gonna be fine, text me," as I left. Honestly, I think it's one of those situations where it's totally valid for OP to be upset and just leave, explaining themselves in that situation. If anybody else in charge there has a brain, nothing should actually happen to OP, and they should be understanding when OP's wife is in the hospital. Accurate Major 3132 commented, "One of the things that was the hardest to do when I retired from the Navy was learning that I didn't have to ask permission to do things. I just had to say, my wife is in the hospital, I am leaving, I will keep you posted." Our next story is, short-staffed? No problem. I work for a visitor attraction in London. Generally, we're out on the floor answering questions, etc. We had a dedicated team that worked in the control room. Usually supervisors or those that wanted to become supervisors. Normally 1 or 2 people in the control room. They were never ever on the floor if they could help it. They watched the CCTV and controlled the breaks, lunches, etc. For instance, if a visitor sets off an alarm, they would call us and we would investigate the alarm. Management decided to pull the supervisors out onto the floor and train floor personnel to be in the control room. Good idea on paper, but in practice? Supervisors didn't want to go on the floor, and those on the floor didn't want to go in the control room. Some of us already worked in the control room as we relieved them for breaks, lunches, etc. Basically, if you were in the control room, you stayed in there. First training week went something like this. Someone that knew the control room training 3 or 4 of the floor people. Needless to say, that put us short-staffed on the floor, and management had to go on the floor to cover. As, how hard could it be? It'll only be a week and then I can go back to my cushy desk job. First day, I was training 3 or 4 floor staff, and management and supervisors were on the floor. Management told me to treat them like normal floor staff. Okay, no problem. I asked everyone that I was training normal floor staff. We all got big smiles on our faces. Not even 10 minutes go by and radio call. "Can one of you bring the keys for the front door so we can let the public in? It's a 5-minute walk from control to the front door." I radio one of the management on the floor saying, "Come to control and pick up the keys and take to the front door." I get a phone call. "Just have so-and-so bring them over, there's 4 of you in there." As per procedure, nobody is allowed out of control room. Management take 5 minutes to get to control and then take the keys over to front door, so we're late opening. Next radio call. "Which key is it?" "It's number so-and-so." They open the doors, alarm goes off. "Control, why did alarm go off?" "You need to call control to let us know exactly when to take alarm off." Procedure. All of this is written down, procedures must be followed. Now that the public is in, alarms start going off for various reasons. The public loves going through doors that say, "Door is alarmed." Normal stuff. I start radio calls to management on the floor. "Charlie 3, go to door X. Charlie 3, go to door X," etc., etc. "Delta 4, relieve Charlie 3 for their lunch." Lunchtime, I get phone calls from people who haven't been relieved for their lunch on time. Management hasn't figured out that travel time between your post and the break area is not included in your lunch and break. If you have an hour lunch and it takes you 10 minutes walking time to get there, then basically your lunch is 40 minutes. 10 minutes to go from your post to break room and 10 minutes to go back to post. Normal control room staff knew this and would start lunches early to give everyone as much as possible a full lunch. More radio calls. "Charlie 3, can you check the toilet? Report of water on the floor." "Charlie 3, can you go to X? Visitor wants to use a voucher." "Actually, Charlie 3, go to door X." They reply, "But I'm with a visitor." "Doors take priority, Charlie 3. For the rest of the day, we ran management crazy. Everything in the procedures was adhered to. Count the empty spaces in the car park, check locks on the emergency gates, check toilets, men's and women's, to see if they need to be refilled with toilet paper. Look for lights out, fill in your task book, etc. Next day, needless to say, I wasn't in the control room. Didn't matter, the tone was set. Didn't matter who was in there. The rest of the week went by the same. Everyone that followed me ran management nuts. Management, to their credit, changed some things after that. Black sneakers can now be worn. More break rooms closer to the posts have been opened. Procedures have been loosened up. Control people are back in control and floor people are on the floor. Everyone is now trained in the control room, but they only have to work it if they want. Still was a glorious week. Honestly, the results of this story are exactly why once in a while, upper management should just have a day where they go, doesn't have to be necessarily undercover, but on the floor and work the jobs other people below them do, so that they can have an appreciation. And on the other side, the people who work the floor, they would have a greater appreciation for the management who rolled their sleeves up and got to work. This all ended up actually being pretty beneficial, it seems, for the workplace. Pakui7 commented, "It's a sad fact that the idea to walk a mile in someone else's shoes is such a literal necessity for so many. Management wouldn't and couldn't see the glaring issues with the workday for you all, not until they had to experience it themselves. I mean, the lunchtime issue itself, with some having such a long travel time, was ridiculous." But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely awesome malicious compliance story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.